Hi, I'm Allie, and I'm going to show you how to use some Tila beads and some seed beads to make this fun, groovy bracelet design. We're going to be using a right angle weave technique with kind of a twist, so make sure you watch the whole thing. If you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video to shop with us online. We'll put a little link there with helpful other videos, as well as a link to all the supplies exactly that were used in this video. Gather up your materials and let's get started. So to begin our grooviness bracelet, I have some gray dragon thread in the size 6, and I'm using Tila beads, and I have 5 colors here of 11 seed beads. You can do one color like the sample piece, or you can do a diagonal like I will be doing. I figured I'll show you the diagonal because that's a little bit harder and just to kind of keep track of. And then if you want to do the simple one, that's easy as well. So the first thing we're going to do is add one of our Miyuki Tila beads on. They have 2 holes and they're about a 5.5 millimeter bead. From here, we are going to take 2 of our metallic purple beads. We're going to add them onto our needle and thread, and we're going to go back through that same Tila bead towards the stop bead. And when it comes to thread, I'm using about 5 feet. You will likely have to add thread to it. On the opposite side, I'm going to use 2 of my matte seed beads, and I'm once again going to sew through my Tila bead. It's going to put, I'm trying to move that stop bead out the side there. It's going to put 2 beads to the side here that I have coming out. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add actually 3 beads to the top. Those 3 beads at the top are going to be the same color of the beads that I added at the base. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 of these beads, and I'm going to sew back through the Tila bead through that same hole. And what I'm doing is sewing in from the opposite side, which will bring the seed beads to the top. So now we have the Tila bead where it is decorated here, get a little closer, where it is decorated here by 2 beads on the outside, 2 beads on the right side, and 3 beads sitting at the top. I'm now going to do a right angle unit. And our first right angle unit is going to be our purple color. So I'm going to sew down through those 2 beads, and it gets easier, I promise, as it gets repetitive. And we're going to make a little right angle weave box. We're going to make our box by having 2 beads on the right and the left and 3 beads on the top and the bottom. So I've just added 3 beads for the bottom, 2 for the right, and 3 for the top. My thread's coming out of the bottom of those purple beads. I'm going to sew into the top of them to complete my right angle unit. And I have my little box here. From here, I want to get to the right-hand side of the box. If you know right angle weave, you always want to come out the right. I'm going to go through the 3 beads that are the bottom of my box. And then, because you're going to see here, you're creating these little boxes. And then I'm going up through the 2 beads that are the right side of the box. So it's more like a rectangle. From here, I'm going to get ready to add my next Tila bead. So I'm adding my next Tila. Tilas do have a side. They have a top and a bottom. One side's a little bit more rounded. One side is a little bit more flat. I am not worried about that right now. From here, I'm going to pick my next color. So I'm going to go with this transparent thistle. Just like we were doing before, we have our Tila on, so we're getting repetitive. 2 beads go on, and I sew down the bottom hole of that same Tila bead. From here, I go back to the 2 beads that are on the last right angle weave, that purple color. Previously, remember, we added them, but now they're already there. So we're sewing up through those 2 beads. And now as we get to the side here, we're going to sew through that delicate bead, through the Tila bead, top hole after sewing through those 2 beads on the right. When we're here at the top, we need to add our 3 beads. So your 3 beads are always going to be the color of your last box or the color that sits behind it. 3 beads get added, and I take my thread and needle around in a circle through that same hole of that Tila bead. So the thread is coming out the right. I add 3 beads. I go into the left side of that Tila, and I give a nice tight pull and pop those 3 beads to the side. From here, I'm going to sew down through the 2 beads on the right of that Tila right angle unit and make my next right angle stitch. So I need 3 beads for the bottom. Once I have those 3 beads for the bottom, I need 2 for the side, and I need 3 more for the top. Coming back into those 2 beads, my thread was coming out the bottom. I'm now sewing into the top, bringing the thread out of the bottom and creating that right angle unit. From here, I need to sew through those bottom 3 beads and then up and out the 2, which are the right-hand side of that unit. I'm going to add one more Tila now, and you're going to continue this the whole length of the project then. Tila gets added, I pick my next color, which I'll do this Duracoat Opaque. 2 beads go on. Let that all go down to the project. Sew through the second hole of that same Tila bead. That pops those 2 purple beads on the exterior, connecting them to the right side of the previous box, sewing back through those 2 beads there behind. Once I do that, I'm going to sew through the Tila bead, not through any seed beads on the other side. And then once I have that done, I'm going to add my 3 beads to the top of the Tila. The 3 beads on the top of the Tila will be that translucent color, that thistle, I think it is. Is it thistle? Yep. And I'm going to circle around the Tila. See, that pops those beads there right to the top. From here, to build my next right angle unit, I always need to come out through the seed beads. And now I'm ready once again to add my next box. 3 to the bottom, 2 to the right, 3 to the top, circling around. If you need help with this, continuing to go, and this is going to be about the whole length of your wrist till it touches at the ends. That'll give us room for our clasp if you're using an infinite clasp. That whole length, this is going to be 1 out of 3 rows. You can make it as wide as you want, as narrow as you want, and you can make it squared or rounded. I'll show you those techniques as we build on. But you're going to keep going for that whole first long row along the project, adding in these beads and continuing to add the Tilas. Once you have the project as long as you need it, again, you want to make sure that it kind of touches on the back, because by the time we add our infinite clasp, then like the sample piece, that'll give us enough room to put on and off. Unless you like really tight bracelets, then you're going to want to leave about a 1/4 inch or so, because your clasp is going to take up about a 1/2 inch. So how we're going to add our next row onto it. We're coming out of the piece, and when we're looking at it, we've gone through and we've added our last beads here, and I was getting a little excited and went through those beads, but really your thread and needle is going to be exiting right here through the Tila bead, because you just added those 3 beads that sit on the top. And you can see the pattern here that you have your right angle weave cube, then you have your beads. Same color goes right after. So just do a quick inventory to make sure that you're good to go with that, because that's going to continue to create our diagonal design that we're going for. So from here, we are going to actually step up into those 3 seed beads that sit on the top. The seed beads that sit on the top will now be where our seed bead right angle weave unit is. And where our seed bead right angle weave unit is now going to be where we put our Tila beads. So they're going to be opposite. So the first thing we need to do is create another right angle weave box right here. We're using that thistle color, and we're right now on the bottom of our box. I'm going to add 2 beads for the left side of the box. 1, 2, 3 beads for the top of the box, and then 1, 2 beads for the right of the box. Going into the box just like we did previously. We're going in here, and I'm going to turn this to its side, so you see it a little bit on the side action. I'm going to sew through and make this into my next unit. I'm going to flip it so my stop bead's at the other end, and I'm going to sew down through the 2 beads that sit then on this right hand side. So I'm coming out of the box or out of the design with that same color that's going to go on a diagonal, and we're coming out through the 2 beads that are on the right side of the box that we just created, that thistle color. From here coming out, we are going to add our next Tila bead. Our next Tila bead gets added, and just like we did previously, we're going to grab our next color to hit the top. How do you know what color hits the top and which color to pull? You're going backwards now. So I'm going to add my 2 beads, going back through my Tila, through the opposite hole, pulling that nice and tight. And then, rather than going right away to those 2 beads that sit on the left, we're going to snake through the beads that sit above it. Those 3 beads from the right angle unit above. We're going to sew through them, coming out the left side of that Tila bead, and we're going to connect that to the Tila. So see how we pull that close to the Tila. We're going to sew down through the Tila again. So see how that connected it to the previous right angle weave row. From here, we're going to sew down through the 2 beads, and don't worry, we'll do it again. We're going to sew through the 2 beads that we connected to that first right angle unit that we created. We're going to sew through that Tila bead, and just like we did previously with that Tila, we're going to add our 3 beads for our next unit. The 3 beads are going to be the same color that we just added on the right hand side, and then back up through the Tila. So basically we're going the whole way around the Tila, connecting all the beads on the sides to the holes. So see how it's going to sit now? That you have 3 beads for the next one that are ready to go. You have your 2 that you added on the side of the Tila. You connected to the 3 at the top, and you connected to the 2 at the side. So from here, coming out the Tila, I want to make sure that I'm coming out the right hand side of the beads, and I'm going to do my next right angle weave unit. Doing my next right angle weave unit, I don't need to add 3 beads for the top because the 3 beads are already there. So I'm going to sew into those 3 beads that we added on the side of the Tila bead, and that's going to be the left hand and the top of my next box. Add 2 more beads for the right side, and then 3 beads for the bottom of the box. Go back into those original 2 beads that are on the left, and that's going to create that little right angle weave box. Now, just like normal with right angle weave, we want to sew through the unit. I'm sewing through the top there, and then I'm making sure that my needle and thread are coming out of the beads on the right side of the box. So not above the beads, we've sewn through the beads. From here, it's our time to add our another Tila bead. So we're going to go over this again. We're going to add our Tila. Once we add the Tila, if you're in question and say, ooh, I don't actually know what I'm adding on this side, just kind of form it to the side here and look what your next color is. My next color is that matte root beer. Add 2 there. I'm going to sew through my Tila bead. And you can do this in a couple different steps. You can connect it right away to those 2 beads if you want to. I'm going to, while I'm here, connect it to the 3 beads that sit to the top of it. There's 3 beads from that unit. So I'm connecting to those 3 beads. I'm circling the whole way around, circling back through that bead to connect it. So there it got connected to the top. Then I'm going back down, connecting the units to the previous right angle weave. So you're literally sewing around. You sew into this, add that, circle back around, circle through there. Now I'm going to go through my Tila bead. Which color do I add to the bottom of the Tila? I'm going to add that root beer color because I know that's going to be the next one coming down. If you're doing all one color, perfectly fine. Just add that same color if you're doing like a turquoise one. Back through the Tila, and on we go. From here, to start my next unit, I need to go up through those 2 beads that sit on the right side of the Tila. Go through the 3 beads that are connected to the Tila from the row previous. Add 1, 2 more beads for the right side, 1, 2, 3 beads for the bottom. Go into those beads, circling that out. Here's my right angle unit. I'm going to sew through the top 3 beads that were already there. And then I'm going to make sure before I add my next Tila that I'm coming down and exiting through the right side of that right angle unit. From here, we're on repeat. So we're going to go in and we're going to keep adding our Tila bead next with our 2 beads on the side, then connecting to the 3 there, then connecting to the 2, then adding 3 more on the side. If you have trouble with this, just rewind, basically go back into it, look at the previous step, watch it again. Through repetition, you're going to get it really, really easily. Once you get your length of row 2, it's time to do the same thing for row 3. The only thing with row 3 is we don't need to do those 3 little seed beads that hang out on the bottom because we're at the end and we don't have additional rows. If you want to make it a little bit wider and you want more than those 3 rows, you can always keep going and you'll just add the seed beads along the side. Or some people might decide they want the seed beads along the side just for that color pop on the exterior. From here, I'm coming out the end of my right angle unit. I'm going to sew through the 3 seed beads that are at the bottom. So instead of continuing on, I'm kind of backtracking. I'm going to pick up my next Tila bead and I'm going to sew that Tila in to those 3 beads by coming out of them, adding the Tila, sewing back in to get that Tila to lay right across. From here, I'm going back through the Tila bead. I'm going to pick my next color to put on top here. So I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, what's before the matte bead? Oh, it's that light amethyst AB. So I'm going to add those 2 beads, which is just the end, so it really doesn't matter, but we'll stay consistent with pattern. Coming out here then, I'm going to turn it because look, it just became the exact same design. We're going in here and we're going to add our 2 beads, just like we've been doing normally. And then I'm going to circle around, going back out through the Tila. You can go back through the seed beads if you want to. Go up then through my seed beads here. Go through my 3 seed beads at the top because I'm just continuing on with my right angle weave. Once you're on through the right angle weave here, you continue with your stitch. So I need 3 beads along the side, or sorry, 2 beads along the side and my 3 beads for the bottom. Circle that out, going back through those beads. And you can see I skipped adding the seed beads on the side of the Tila bead. So I'm going to go back through here, then come on down. Those 2 beads go through, and then you're going to look at your next line and see where your next beads get added. So again, I'm going to do my Tila bead here. I add my next Tila bead. Look at it and see where it falls. All right, I know I need to add my purple bead because it's going to be part of that purple box. Going back through the Tila, we're connecting it the same way. Coming up through here, sewing back through those 3 beads from the row above it. Circling back through that Tila. Making sure I don't have a ton of extra thread showing, so just giving a little tight pull. We'll tap on the beads. Connecting to the right angle weave row before it. Going through the Tila, and then once I'm done here, I don't need to wrap around and add any seed beads. I'm just going up through the seed beads and continuing with my stitch. You can see then you're going to get that nice diagonal pattern where you have the rows of your colors of your beads. So go ahead and finish out this 3rd row here of your piece. I'm going to do a little bit magic and sew my sample piece onto my finished piece there, and then we'll get ready to add our clasp. Once you get finished coming down the line here and doing all your circles, you can see that fun diagonal stitch pattern that's going on when you use different beads. Or like I said, you can keep it nice and consistent and just use one color. So it's kind of up to you. Here on my starter piece, I have a infinite clasp here with my cabochon. I'm going to show you how to use a button in case you want to do a different clasp, which is done mainly that same way. In this example piece, I ended with a Tila bead. So depending on which way you end, Tila, or if you end the opening, kind of up to you, depending on the size. And what I'm going to do first is come back through the bracelet, just zigzagging back through that design because I need to come out through that middle section there in order to add my button. From here, I'm also going to have the opportunity to go in then, and after I add my button clasp, go in and come down the sides and square off the project. Right now it's a little bit on the rounded side. We are going to, if you want it even more rounded, you can use a connection of 3 and 3. But what we're going to do is make our grooviness, it's hip to be square, they said during our on our Twitch one here. We're going to go in and actually square out the outer edges here, and we're going to add in some extra seed beads running along the exterior 2 rows of our Tila beads. First, we're going to add our button, and then we're going to start sewing down. To get our button into place, I'm coming out of the Tila, going back into that middle section, and I'm going to come out through that side of the seed beads, and that's how I'm going to attach my button. Now, I want my button to be able to sit flat, so I want it to have a little bit of room with seed beads before I have it right on the edge of my project. So coming out the edge there, you can decide what beads. I'm going to use my Duracoat Opaque Catalina one here, and I'm going to pick up, there's 5, 6 beads. After my 6 beads, I'm going to pick 1 more bead that varies, 2 more beads, 1, 2, and then I'm going to go up through the button. On the other side, we'll just make a loop in the same regard. Instead of going through the button, we'll do a loop. In the middle here, I'll mimic and I'll do that same, actually whatever I pick up, 3 beads, back down through the button. And I'm using a cup button. Coming out the back, I want to do 2 beads go through that alternate seed bead that I grabbed, that alternate color, that matte one. And see how that makes just a nice little V there? That allows that button to sit back and has a little bit more room from the bracelet, so when the loop goes, it's not too tight. From here, just like I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'll do 6 more. I had to count it because I forgot how many I added. And anything after 2 would work too. I'm going to come down through that opposite side of that right angle weave unit, and that should sit right there. We're going to reinforce going back through, up through the clasp, up through that whole entire unit that you just did, back down through, and then we're going to get, so our thread and needle are coming out the 3 seed beads here along the side, then coming out one of the sides of our Tila beads. Once you're exiting through the bottom hole of the Tila, that's where we're going to come back together and start adding some extra seed beads along the side. All right, so the next step is really easy to execute. You can be finished with the bracelet at this point if you want to, and I downed it to 4 beads. I wanted to sit a little bit closer, realize my bracelet's getting a little bit long. But what we're going to do is we're going to come along the outside and grab the 3 beads that are on the outer row. Pick up a new 11-0 after coming out through the Tila bead. Sew through the 3 beads at the bottom of this right angle unit. Coming out there, add another one of your purple beads. Sew through the next Tila. Once you're through the next Tila, see how you get a nice squared effect there? Once you're through the next Tila, grab another bead, same color as the unit you're working on. Grab those 3 beads that sit at the bottom of that unit, or in this case to the right. Grab another one, sew on down. Nice and simple to get that easy squared off outer edge. Go the whole way down, and then we're going to add our loop on the other side of our clasp. After going down the top of the bracelet, I also snaked down and came down the bottom of the bracelet. What I'm going to do now is get it even more boxed out by going through the second hole, or the interior hole, of both the first and the third line of my Tila beads. So once you're done here, you're going to take your thread and needle, go to the interior of that hole. So you're going to the interior hole of that Tila bead, and then you're going to do the exact same thing. So you're going to go in and grab your seed bead, come down through those 3 that sit along this side. Oops. Great if I do the right needle. Grab a seed bead, sew down through those 3 beads that sit on the interior. Grab a seed bead of that same color, go through the next Tila bead. So you're running through that secondary, or that inner hole of the Tila beads to see how you get that nice kind of squared look. We're going to keep the center one rounded, and we're not going to do the center at all, just because it gets a little bit tight for the look. Or if you don't want the squared look, you can also, again, not do it and just do the rounded on the sides, like this little sample piece as well. One thing I did want to show was during Twitch, during our live creation time, we thought maybe we should try it with some Delica beads and see what it looks like. Delica beads, honestly, not that much difference. So if you have Delica beads and want to use Delica beads in place, you can do the exact same project with Tilas and Delicas. Once you complete that first 2 rows of your Tila beads here, you get an opportunity to come down to the end and do a clasp. I came to the interior and I did my loop for my button, 4 seed beads, 1 together, just like we did. I then also came over, took off my stop bead, and tied my thread end, where the stop bead was, to the thread that I'm currently working on. From here then, I'm going to snake back through the design, get over to the second, or the interior hole of the Tilas on the opposite side, and come down the opposite side, making sure as I come down that I'm squaring off again, just like you can see it started here, and I just need to get a little bit further with that nice squared off design, squaring up the exterior holes of all of those beads. As I come back down and finish up the design, I'm just going to get rid of my thread basically. And I'm sewing towards the interior. I'm going to use this opportunity to reinforce my button for my loop to go through. And coming up through the design, I'm once again just going to make that a little bit more passive. Now, when it comes to clasps or closures, I always like to get minimum 2, preferably 3 times the thread through. So 3 passes of thread through my clasp. The reason is not because the thread is not durable, but because this is where the biggest wear and tear happens. How many bracelets or designs have you had that have broken after years of wear at the clasp? So the more thread that you have going through there without getting it too tight that you're going to break your beads, the better for the longevity of your design. So I'm going to come back down here then into the interior of my design. And whenever I do the ending of my thread, if I'm not at a place where I have the thread ends like I did at the opposite side, what I do is sew down into the project and tie off the thread. So I'm away from the clasp, kind of at an inconspicuous place. I'm going to take my needle and thread and sew underneath the thread line, or the line that connects one bead to another. So I'm underneath that right angle weave thread line. I make a loop with my thread, then I pass my needle through once, and I pass my needle through twice through that loop. What that does is create, if you don't get hooked on your pliers, a nice sewer's knot, which will allow it to get nice and tight down to the project, give a nice tight pull. I'll take my thread and needle elsewhere in the design. I'll do that one more time. And then after doing so, and this really wants to get caught in my pliers here, I will go through and burn down the thread end just like I did at the start here. I'm just going to let you guys watch me struggle. There we go. Put those pliers to the side. So now going down the design, I'm going to pick up one more space, tie it off, grab my thread zapper, my thread burner, burn it down to finish off this Grooviness bracelet. It has a really cool feel. You can play around with color a ton, which I'm excited about. Look how different this purple one looks with the purple gradient versus my turquoise one that I still need to finish up. The loops versus the squares versus the delicas. You can have fun even incorporating bugles and really going to town with this design, switching up the multi-hole beads, and hopefully giving you a design element and a design idea if you do want to use extra multi-hole beads. If you do, don't forget to comment below, as well as post your designs in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Thanks so much for joining me in this Grooviness bracelet. It's super fun to see the color variations. Would be great as a choker as well, that you can do that also. And remember, if you do need any materials, go ahead below the video into that product description or the video description. We'll put a link there to get back to our website with all of the materials listed and links to those as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads, and stay tuned for our next inspirational design.